Wow, that's super cool. I mean, it's super. I find it super exciting to see your world.
Thank
It's
you.
you're one of a very few young women I've met who've done so much. And been so independent and creating a company like this. It's fantastic, and it's a great story. Also, the fact that, I mean, it's almost like being pulled up on water skis, right? Here you are at the beginning of creating this online platform. You have your first clients already, but all of a sudden COVID happens, and is actually something which just, it's like going into the orbit of a planet to pick up speed. It's just going to ramp you up. At the same time, it must also be ramping up the competitors.
Absolutely.
How do you see, who are your competitors, and how seriously are you threatened by them?
So yeah, great question. Having competitors mean we're in the right space, and having competitors that are picking up means our industry is picking up. So that's also great. Not that it's all happy and like nice, but I think overall it gives a good signal about the market itself to us. So we do have two types of competitors. We would categorize this one group as old school competitors. They are more of the old school virtual event softwares that are a bit heavy, and they're a bit like second world type of avatar type of look and feel and user interface that it wouldn't
Like
really
Minecraft?
exactly. So it wouldn't really quite run very well on different devices because it's just very heavy. Its code is very heavy. I thought a lot of Gen Z students or millennial recruiters who are very used to specific type of user experience or interface wouldn't really resonate very well with those type of interfaces. So I saw some opportunity. And also we do have second type of competitors. We call them the new school competitors. They are built just a few years ago, career fair apps, and they are mostly text chat based virtual career fair apps that help recruiters and students do text messenger type of communication when
So
they
no
have
videos.
no
No
videos,
videos, no.
which is surprising. So
That's really weird.
I know. That's why we built this. So yeah, there are two types. So funny enough, we're much younger, but we are still considered as one of the cooler companies to look at because of those reasons. And of course, these companies have been around for much longer. They've been established in the industry. Their names, everyone knows. So it's definitely a huge benefit to them. But we think that we have very different approach, very hands-on with the customers every day. And we are much closer in terms of like understanding what students or universities need, and we can move so much faster. So we're basically overall excited for sure.
That's very interesting. So yeah, your competitive advantage in a way is that you're young and still in touch with this whole milieu. But is there any way that you can translate that into a tech advantage? What prevents, bigger companies with more funding and more engineers from copying you and taking over the market?
Absolutely. So one of the companies that you guys are all probably familiar with, Handshake, which is a career services platform.
Yeah, we use it at Shoe, actually.
Yeah, so they recently announced, I think it's about a week and a half ago, that they announced that they're going to implement virtual career fair features. I mean, I was absolutely annoyed for the next 2-3 days for sure, but what we figured out is that they haven't built anything yet, even with those engineers, and that they can only implement something for fall because they need time. They need a lot more engineering time, design time, discussion time to implement certain features because they're much bigger. As opposed to us, we can literally just implement features or test up just every other day. If we have to, we can do it daily. Also, we've run a few virtual career fairs for the last few weeks, and we definitely learned a lot. There are a lot of assumptions that we made and a lot of assumptions that we had to update, and therefore the features that we had to update or fix. And one of our amazing team member, she literally mentioned that, you know what, Handshake doesn't know any of this. They're just starting to build it. We know all of this. So basically, because we can move fast, do fast, I think we have this advantage to implement customers' need much faster.
Yeah, so first mover advantage.
I don't know if we're a first mover. We're definitely second or third, but we're the newer type of those movers. So, you know, there was MySpace and there was Facebook, and you know, we're definitely not MySpace.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe I guess it's interesting what you're saying. I mean, it's maybe not so much being a first mover as being focused, right? Because the companies that you just mentioned, all of them have so many irons in the fire that they're not maybe focused on this niche. Is that because, what is the market size? Is that because it's not a very big market that they're not that interested in it?
I think there are a few factors. So it's estimated to be about $10 billion market a year in the US. So it's a pretty good size market, which is why, just like any recruiting market, it's a pretty good size market, which is why there are already competitors in the space of different forms. It's not just virtual career fairs, but then also there are different, you know, graduate or like grad job boards, or all type of different formats of the competitors are there in the space. I wouldn't say competitors, but more like players, I would say. So it is a definitely a great market. But I think there are definitely advantages that we can create. We're not the first mover, but yeah, we can create those new type of opportunities and bring new type of models to more universities, which we are very excited about.
Super cool. So I want to invite the audience to submit any questions you have, because we definitely want to take some time for Q&A towards the end here. And while we wait for your questions to come in, I just wanted to ask one other question kind of related to the competitors. Since a lot of the ones you mentioned are bigger companies, is that kind of your exit strategy? Would your exit strategy be to sell, or do you plan to continue? And I know this is a big question to ask right now, but I mean, longer term, in 10 years, are you still at the helm of Highre and diversifying into other fields, or have you sold and you're living on a beach someplace?
So I think this can be a really disappointing answer to Techstars. So exit strategy is not something that I think about every day, to be honest with you. I think we're busier to build this, and we were busy with communicating with the users, or you know, fixing features every day. So that's what we're focused more so right now. But when we look at, you know, 5-10 years down the road, we can kind of like, you know, at this point, maybe our vision may evolve over time. About 5-10 years down the road, what we can see is that we become that a virtual career fair place where a lot of universities are flexibly using, you know, without any kind of like heavy commitment, things become like much more flexible, lighter. They can create their own event, invite anyone. So at that point, you know, we hope to see that we have most of the universities in our pool, most of the university recruiting teams from different companies in our pool, so that they can flexibly connect, host, meet, talk, and share. So that's where we see ourselves. So yeah, we haven't really deeply thought about who do we sell ourselves to yet, actually.
Okay, we're getting a bunch of questions in, Tasha. So the first one is really asking us to look at it from other points of view rather than just the university. So from the employer point of view, you know, what is the biggest challenge in this virtual environment? And I guess that goes to, like, you know, okay, if you're on the same plane physically, a digital plane with all the other employers, how do you stand out? Do you feel there are some companies who are dealing with that better than others?
Absolutely. I think people still love good logos and good names. So definitely it attracts a lot more attention. But there are some really interesting examples. So we had this one of the virtual career fairs, and there was Google, and there was a startup that is more like Airbnb for musical instruments. And so when we look at it, obviously this is like, I don't know, 10 people company versus like it's Google, I mean, the Google. When we actually looked into data, of course, you know, Google had lots of booth visits and booth views. But also there's like a resume drop-off number, and then versus this company that has much smaller name. Of course, less booth visit, but a lot of people actually ended up applying for positions in that company a lot, because what company does was very, very interesting. And the roles that company was hiring was super interesting. So I think as long as these companies are doing something really interesting and resonate with the participating students, that they can still win. So that was something very surprising to us as well.
Interesting. And then the flip part of that question was really from the student point of view. That, okay, so now how do you stand out as a student in this new environment?
Right. So first of all, create your profile with, to make sure that like, just have a really nice resume. I think nowadays, great resume not only, means that you have great history of work or like nicely curated history, but also it needs to look good. It just captures anyone's attention much better. So if you can use any of the design tools or any of the, if you have any great mentors or career services, just talk to them about make it look good, as well as, make sure that it contains all the great work history that you have in a concise, clean way. So create the profile, but also, research a lot. We do provide companies information and also hiring positions for each company. So go through those information, make sure that you learn about the company, not at just a superficial level, but you're really interested in a particular position, learn about different projects, learn about different things that the company's or teams did. So be prepared to talk to them, and also be on time, try to look good as much as possible. Even in the virtual setup, we see some students putting lots of effort, showing up in suits and tie on the video calls. I think it's really adorable, but then also it's very professional at the same time. So we appreciate that a lot.
So another question is, if the prospective employee interviews, if the company, if there's a metric of how many students were actually interviewed, do people have access, like as a student, I guess, in a career fair, can you get a sense of what is the ratio of the number of people who applied versus those who get an interview or a callback interview?
Yes, so employers will be able to access that information. And
employers, but not students?
Not students yet. I think right now we haven't really opened it up to the students yet. I think students may get a bit anxious if we get a lot of like emails, like if they see that activities are happening and they don't get anything. We actually get a lot of questions about why, which is not really our decision. It's completely employer's decision. So we used to have it and put it away for now, and then we're reviewing the future at the moment.
I see. So another question is, you've talked a lot about the advantages of the virtual career fairs. It sounds like it's really working. The question is really, what do you see as disadvantages, or maybe what kind of, complaints do you get, or that you haven't been able to address yet?
Yeah, of course. I mean, just like all of us, we all prefer to hang out with our friends in person than, having virtual coffee or virtual lunch, whatever we're trying to do during COVID. So I think it's the same way. A lot of employers, it would be easier to pick up someone's impression or energy or kind of maneuver around the conversation much easier in the physical setup. So that's definitely, some of the things that they miss. Or we also saw some of the employers that are less, like some employers are not necessarily on computer all the time. So we had a lot of law enforcement who are usually, on the field with weapons. So when they come to hire students through virtual career fairs, it seems like it creates a bit more difficulties for them. But then I think there is actually a learning curve happening as a whole industry, now a lot of people are getting used to it. Now it's their first, second, third time of doing virtual career fair. So I think it will definitely need a bit more time for everyone that so that we can all get used to it.
Yeah. So part of that learning curve, I think that's an excellent point. We've had, exactly the same experience as a university going online. We had a steep learning curve, and we started off at different places on that learning curve, but people really went up. But part of it is also related to the next question, which is, there was also this sudden surge in technical demand, network capacity demand. How did your company navigate that challenge during this COVID thing?
We definitely had to work a lot on our servers, increasing server a lot. So we actually had to, so even though the surge is coming in right now, a lot of universities are looking to use our services from fall and on. Of course, there are some universities that want to have something right now or soon. So we have been able to manage that better because we have some ramp up time for like even bigger jump for fall and beyond. So we've been sort of like incrementally working on that and still going on at the moment.
So that, I guess, did you have any crazy bad experience where things crashed or anything, or were you able to navigate it incrementally?
Yeah, we actually had so one of the it was that we worked so hard, and it was really kind of like, obviously it was none of what we were expecting or planning or wanted, but crash happened. So we actually had to immediately kind of like work on it as much as we can, but afterwards that was so sad. But there were ways that we had to handle the communication with the customer and employers to first apologize, and second, like, giving them follow-up options, and thirdly, just literally offering them more of what we can do in the near future than to hopefully make up what crashed. So it was I couldn't sleep for like 3 days, but it happened, and then I think it's part of what happens. We can improve, and we did improve hugely for the last few weeks.
Wow, it's super impressive to me that you guys navigated all that, and I can only imagine it must be by moments just so stressful.
It was sad. Yeah.
So I guess there's one question, it's a little bit unclear, but it seems like it's asking, in what way do you think that this kind of virtual career fair will affect the annual recruitment cycle at universities? Do you think it'll completely change it, just modify a tiny bit, or not at all?
That's actually a really, really good question. So a lot of, the biggest reason why there was a cycle of this, there's like a September, October virtual career fair season, and then like, January, February time comes back. It was because it was literally the physical and financial resources. It's just we can't. So we have to allocate certain resources at certain times so that we can make that happen. But right now, again, first, a lot of universities are now looking at breaking that into smaller events, virtual events throughout the year. And also, it's a sad news for graduating students this year, but because of what's happening, sort of like, graduating doesn't mean that you're starting working right away for a lot of students. So that's also getting extended, that's blurring into throughout the summer. So already, like, we have already like many booked in career fairs from different universities throughout the summer. And of course, fall, spring will be the time, but we'll see more of the smaller events, many of smaller events throughout the year. And then also now it all creeped into the summer. So I definitely can see that it's going to be the new trend for sure.
And how do you feel about those smaller events? I mean, in terms of your business model, is it as profitable if you do smaller, or do you have an incentive to try to group them together and say, okay, I know you want to do one that's focusing only on fashion merchandising, but why don't you work with these 5 other colleges who also have that? What's your strategy?
Yeah, so we could potentially do that. There's not a whole lot of difference between smaller events and
Is that
larger
right?
events. So yeah, so we don't really kind of mind. I think eventually, from the user experience standpoint, for students, they get less overwhelmed and they get more focused if it's smaller. And
Mm,
whereas
mm.
their experience is way better too. They wouldn't necessarily receive a totally irrelevant resume from like random program than what they were
Oh,
looking for. So in terms of user experience, it definitely helps much better to have smaller career fairs.
very interesting. So it's quality rather than quantity. You're much more focused.
Exactly. Mhm.
Huh, fascinating. So we're running out of time, but I did
No.
have time for one last question, which is how is the interview process for the hiring companies adapting to virtual engagements?
Right. So companies are actually, we've been speaking to quite a bit of companies, to university recruiting teams. They are actually adapting to this too. And they're also trying to figure out what universities are doing so that they can adapt around what universities are going to do. So we've been having a lot of conversations around this. So first, I think because they are now, they're not able to go to different campuses. They use a lot of like Zoom conferences, virtual conferences a lot. They're completely used to it. So now they're looking at the virtual career fairs very seriously. And of course, they're very interested in attending different different universities, virtual career fairs, totally open. But another thing that we see a lot is that now they are ready to host their own virtual career fairs so that they have one big one engaging many universities to their events so that they don't necessarily have to go work with different universities, but they have everyone come to them. So I think that's one way they are looking at quite a lot nowadays.
Fantastic. Tasha, thank you so much for being with us today. You're such an
Thank you so much.
inspiration and a great role model. It's
Thank
been
you so much.
fascinating to dip into your world and see. I wish you all the best luck. I just have one last question. What parting words of wisdom would you offer to our young wannabe entrepreneurs at Sacred Heart?
Right. So I think there are two things. So first is but yeah, if you have anything that you want to try out, nowadays it's really not that hard to put something out there. You don't really need to build the whole thing. All you need is probably like one web page one web page or website and an Excel spreadsheet, which costs nothing. So if you want anything to happen, if you want to build anything, try out. It's very cheap nowadays. And secondly, it's gonna, if you take it seriously, I think it could be a very long path and it's not gonna be very easy. There are gonna be a lot of times that are very, very challenging, but I think staying true to your core vision or core value and knowing that things are going to be just fine, you're going to figure it out, will help you stay on track. So those two are something that I wanted to share with you guys.